I have always considered myself a lucky man. I had a loving wife, a beautiful daughter, a stable job and a home full of warmth. When I looked at Emma, I saw in her everything I was looking for in a woman: tenderness, care, loyalty. We had been together for more than 10 years, and although we had some minor arguments from time to time, I was convinced that our marriage was strong. Sophie became our greatest happiness. She was born 2 years after we got married, and I remember the first time I held her in my arms. A small, defenseless creature who immediately became the center of my world. I didn't miss a single one of her first moments, her first tooth, her first word, her first step. Emma and I often laughed that Sophie was a little copy of me in personality, although she looked more like my wife. Our mornings were filled with happy chaos. Sophie, with her hair still disheveled from sleep, would run around the kitchen looking for her favorite toy. Emma made coffee, sometimes singing along to the radio, and I read the news, catching myself thinking that this is what a perfect family should look like. Everything was so good that I didn't even realize I was living a lie. That day I went to the supermarket after work. Just to buy coffee and some small things, nothing out of the ordinary. But when I heard a familiar voice near the snack aisle, I couldn't help but stop. Ed? Jack, my old friend, smiled and shook my hand. We hadn't seen each other for 5 years. He was the friend we used to hang out with in bars, discussing life, work, and women. Then our paths diverged. I had a family, and he was always searching for himself. We started talking, first about trifles, and then Jack tilted his head and looked at me curiously. I take it you've forgiven me for everything? I stopped, not understanding. Forgiven what? Jack stuttered, visibly nervous. Dude. You mean you still don't know? Know what? He ran his hand over the back of his head, looking around as if trying to assess whether he should continue this conversation at all. Look, I don't mean to pry. It's just... people have been saying that Sophie. Sophie what? He took a deep breath and finally said something that instantly knocked the ground out from under me. That she's not your daughter. I froze. Somewhere in the distance, cash registers were beeping, people were walking between the aisles, children were laughing, the world continued to exist, and I stood in the midst of this chaos, feeling everything I believed in crumble. You're joking, right? I wish, Jack sighed. I heard that a long time ago, back when you were first married. They said that Emma. Well, that she wasn't always faithful to you. And then Sophie came along. I couldn't believe it. It sounded like a bad joke. You're wrong. Maybe, Jack held up his hands, but if I'm right. You need to know the truth. He walked away, and I was left standing. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and found Sophie's picture on the screen. Not my daughter? No. It didn't make sense. But the doubt had already settled in my mind. At home, I behaved as usual. I didn't want to arouse suspicion. Emma was in a good mood, cooking dinner, joking with Sophie, who was making something out of clay on the kitchen table. I looked at them and tried to see the lie. I started to remember. Emma's pregnancy, her nervousness in those months. How she had once disappeared for a day, saying she was staying with a friend, and then made long excuses. I remembered how her mother, when she first saw Sophie, spoke with a strange note in her voice. She is so unexpected. I didn't pay attention at the time. These memories hit me like a wave of cold water. I looked at my daughter. She was as sweet as ever. And I loved her. But suddenly a crack appeared in my heart. What if Jack was right? I had to find out the truth. I stayed up all night. Every detail, every memory over the years was running through my head. The trust one had built over the years was cracking. In the morning, while Emma was still sleeping, I took a hairbrush from her makeup bag. A few blonde strands were left between the teeth. I put them in a bag and hid them in a drawer in the garage. This was the first part of my plan. The DNA test. The wait was hellish. I went to work, smiled when I had to, played with Sophie, kissed my wife goodnight. She didn't suspect anything. And I felt like I was living in a trap. For a week. Then a few more days. And then the envelope came. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The result, 0% probability of paternity. Everything I knew instantly came crashing down. Sophie was not my daughter. My mind went blank. I felt neither anger nor pain, only deafening silence. I sat on the couch, staring at the TV, when Emma sat down next to me. "You seem quiet today. Is everything okay?" I looked at her. The same woman I loved. The woman who had lied to me for so many years. "Yes, I'm just tired," I forced a smile. She touched my hand gently. "If something is wrong, you can tell me." Her concern burned. "I can tell you? Really?" I felt anger boiling inside me. "But not now. Not at this moment. I want to know more. I want to know the whole truth." I started digging. At night, when Emma fell asleep, I sat in the garage with my laptop. I checked old photos, messages, bank statements. And I found it. A strange payment from 15 years ago. A large sum of money. Who did it go to? I opened the transaction details. The name didn't tell me anything. But the address. A motel on the other side of town. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, when Emma took Sophie to school, I went there. The receptionist was already elderly, with wrinkled hands and tired eyes. "Excuse me," I smiled at her, trying to look casual, "but I need to clarify something." I showed her my bank statement. "See this payment? It was made here many years ago. Do you remember anything about it?" She squinted, looking at it. "That's strange. Such large sums rarely pass through our motel." She flipped through the old logbooks until she stopped. I saw her face change. "Do you know this person?" "Yes. She was a woman who came here with her husband. They always paid in cash." I felt my heart clench. "Did she come here often?" "Many times," she nodded, "and not with just one man." Inside, I felt as if I had fallen into an abyss. I looked at the name in the magazine. And I felt sick. It was my wife. I walked out of the motel, feeling the world around me losing its reality. My head was pounding, my heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. Emma had been cheating on me for years. More than once, with more than one man. And all this time I believed that I lived in a happy family. I gripped the cold metal of the steering wheel in the car. I was tearing up inside. This is not all. This was just the beginning. I didn't know what I would do next, but one thing was clear: I would not stop. I returned home when it was getting dark. Emma greeted me with a smile. "Where were you for so long?" "Something at work kept me away." She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. Her touch made me twitch, but I held back. I had to play my part. "I made dinner," she said, and her voice was genuinely warm. I looked at her and did not recognize her. If I didn't know the truth, I would have sworn that she loved me with all her heart. But now I knew. And it changed everything. For the next few days, I proceeded cautiously. I copied all her messages from her laptop. It turned out that she regularly deleted chats, but I managed to recover some of them. Conversations filled with frivolity. Flirting. Trying to cover her tracks. She was smart. But not smart enough. Because I found one name that was repeated more often than the others. Brian. I felt the same burning cold inside again. I knew Brian. He was one of our acquaintances whom we met at family parties. I remembered how he hugged my wife when we met. How she laughed at his jokes. I remembered how he once looked at Sophie when he thought I couldn't see. And suddenly everything came together in my head. I ran a search on her bank statements. Every month, a certain amount of money was transferred to an unknown account. And when I checked the account holder, it took my breath away. It was Brian. This meant only one thing. He was Sophie's father. And she knew it. She'd known it all along. But why did she stay with me? The answer came quickly. Money. I provided for our family. I paid for everything. And he was getting his share. It was not just a betrayal. It was using me. I was a wallet while he remained a secret lover. The blood rushed to my head. The anger inside me grew in waves. I couldn't take it anymore. The next evening I took the envelope with the DNA results out of the hiding place. Emma was in the kitchen, cooking something. I went in and threw it in front of her. "Open it." She stopped, looking at me. "What is it?" "Just open it." Fear flashed in her eyes. She took the envelope and opened the paper. I could see her face turning pale with each line. "Jake," her voice trembled, "where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter, does it?" I moved closer. "You better tell me. How long have you known?" She lowered her head. "Since the beginning." At that moment, something broke inside me. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice trembled, but not from weakness. She sobbed. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would leave." I laughed. Bitterly. "So you've decided to lie to me for the rest of your life?" She was silent. I stepped closer. "Who else was there?" I hissed. Her eyes widened. "What? Who else was there, Emma? Don't pretend." I threw another piece of paper in front of her, a printout of bank statements. "You were transferring money to him." "My money." She started to cry. I wanted him to." "What? To provide for his child?" I punched the table, making her flinch. "Was that your plan? To leave me with someone else's child and secretly transfer money to her real father?" She covered her face with her hands. "I don't know. I didn't think you would find out. But I did." I leaned closer to her. "And now I'm going to change everything. I have a clear plan for myself." The divorce would be only part of what awaited her. Did she think I would just walk away? That I would give away everything I had built up over the years and leave her to enjoy how she handles my money? No. I had two key objectives: to take everything from her and to make sure that her life would never be the same again. I started by meeting with a lawyer. He listened to me carefully, reviewed the documents, and confirmed my guesses. I had every reason to completely dissolve the marriage without any obligations to her. "Do you want to fight for custody of the child?" I thought for a moment. "Sophie. It wasn't her fault that her mother was a lying woman. But I couldn't look at her the same way now. I wanted the truth to come out." "That's enough for now." The lawyer nodded. "This is going to be a high-profile divorce. If you're ready, we can get started." "I'm ready." I walked out of the office, feeling a gradual increase in my calmness. This was the beginning of the end for Emma. The next step was to destroy her reputation. I met with friends we had known for years. Some of them saw our family as a model. Others must have realized that something was wrong for a long time. "Are you serious?" One of them stared at me when I told them about the DNA test and the financial fraud. I didn't believe it myself until I saw the results. Sarah, the wife of one of my close friends, just shook her head. "Jesus. And you didn't suspect anything?" She was a good actress. I could see the change in their eyes. The rumors spread quickly. The first blow to her reputation was dealt. But it was only the beginning. When I got home, she was waiting for me, her eyes red with tears. "Jake, please. I know what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but..." I held up my hand, silencing her. "It's too late, Emma." "But..." "Sophie." I gritted my teeth. "Don't you dare manipulate me with our daughter now." She flinched. "She's still yours." "She's not mine." It sounded cruel, but I couldn't keep up the illusion any longer. "You used me. You used me all these years." I threw the papers in front of her. "And now you're going to get yours." She looked at the papers, and I saw horror appear on her face. You've already filed the papers?" "Tomorrow the lawyer will submit them to the court." She put her hands over her mouth. "Jake, please don't do this. It's too late." I stepped around her and headed for the stairs. "You have to move out the day after tomorrow." She burst into tears. But I didn't care. She had trampled everything I had. And now she will know what it means to lose. The next day I woke up before dawn. All the events of the last few days were running through my head, but there was no more chaos or pain. Instead, there was cold determination. I went downstairs and heard Emma crying in the living room. She hadn't slept all night. Her sobs should have touched me at some point, made me feel sorry for her, maybe even forgive her. But now I felt nothing but contempt. "Are you still here?" I said as I passed her. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Emma in tears. A storm was raging inside, but I remained cold on the outside. She had lied to me all these years, looked me in the eye and told me she loved me. I could not stay in this house. Every object, every photo on the wall now seemed fake. I took the keys and went to the hotel. I needed to think. The room was quiet, but my mind was in chaos. The facts were forming a single picture. Emma was using me to provide a stable life for someone else's child. She loved Brian, but she was living with me because I was the best option. Anger filled my chest again. I opened my laptop and started digging into her financial transactions. Payments to Brian were only part of it. I noticed regular large expenses that had no logical explanation. She wasn't just lying. She was leading a double life. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. I didn't talk to her, I didn't see Sophie. All our moments together now seemed like an illusion. When I was ready, I returned. Emma met me pale and exhausted. "We need to talk," she said. I walked past her, sat down in a chair, and pulled out my papers. "No. You're going to listen now." I laid it all out in front of her, DNA results, financial statements, printouts of her messages with Brian. She didn't say anything, except her hands were shaking. "You wanted to use me. But you won't succeed." She sobbed, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "I'm filing for divorce. And believe me, I won't leave you anything." For the first time in all these years, I saw fear in her eyes. She realized that she had lost everything. This woman ruined my life. But now I will take mine back. I didn't come home to listen to her excuses. What I found was enough to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine. Dick 3. I had a clear plan for myself. Divorce would be only part of what was to come. Did she think I would just walk away? That I would give away everything I had built up over the years and leave her to enjoy how she handles my money? No. I had two key objectives: to take everything from her and to make sure that her life would never be the same again. I started by meeting with a lawyer. He listened to me carefully, reviewed the documents, and confirmed my guesses. I had every reason to completely dissolve the marriage without any obligations to her. "Do you want to fight for child custody?" She looked up. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale. "Jake," her voice was broken, "we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." I got a cup from the cabinet, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down across from her. "I don't want it to end like this," she wiped away her tears. "I know I did a terrible thing. But we were in love. You know that." I laughed. "Love? You betrayed me from the very beginning, lied to me every day, and now you're talking about love?" She looked away. I wanted to tell you. But I was afraid. Afraid? Afraid of what? That I wouldn't want to raise someone else's child? Or that you would lose your comfortable life? Her silence said more than any words. "You used me, Emma." She shuddered. But now everything was different. I took a sip of coffee. "You're going to lose everything." She looked at me with real horror. "What do you mean?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "Did you think I would just go away and leave you this house, our joint money? Let you live as if nothing had happened?" She bit her lip nervously. "Jake, you're not going to hurt me, are you?" "You won't be hurt at my hands, you'll be hurt by something you've created." I leaned in closer. "I'll leave you with nothing." She shook her head. "No, you can't." "I can. And I will." I stood up and took the cup to the sink. "You have until tomorrow. You have until tomorrow." She said something else, begged, tried to grab my hand, but I just walked out. This woman had no power over me anymore. The lawyer acted quickly. Thanks to the financial documents I had collected, we were able to prove that Emma was spending our joint money on her lover. This was a violation of the marriage contract, and the court sided with me. I got to keep the house. Her bank accounts were frozen while the case was pending. She could no longer use my money. When she got the papers, she called me. "Jake. You can't just leave me like this." "It's not just like that," I replied coldly. "But, Sophie, I've taken care of her. She won't be left without help. But you." I stopped. "You'll only get what you deserve." She was sobbing into the phone, but I wasn't listening anymore. The final touch was meeting Brian. I found him in the bar where he worked. When I walked in, he immediately changed in face. "Jake." I sat down across from him. "You know why I'm here." He sighed and rubbed his face. "Yeah. So tell me one thing, was it worth it?" He looked down. I don't know." "Then I'll tell you." "No." I leaned closer. "You didn't just ruin my life. You've ruined Sophie's life. She's going to grow up knowing that her mother is a liar and her biological father is a coward who didn't even try to take responsibility." Brian clenched his fists but didn't say a word. I stood up. "Live with it." And he left. Emma moved out the next day. I didn't watch her pack, didn't listen to what she said. We were no longer a family. I watched her leave, watched her look back for the last time. But there was no room for regret in my heart. I got my life back. And no one would make me lose it again.